Just getting this out of the way, that this is a series of shorts I made on Lancer. The shorts only cover some of the basic mechanics of the game and little else. In the future, more shorts will be made about Lancer, about individual licenses, and then eventually we will have another long-form video about the lore of the game. Once all the shorts wrap up and the long-form video about the lore is out, we'll be moving on to its supplements and then to other RPGs in general. So please watch this video if you prefer to have all your videos tightened up in one sort of 10-minute jump. Each video is just going to remain as is, so you'll just hear and see any issues that those videos have. There are some missed details, I think some people in the comments pointed out. Those have not been amended here. It's just the videos as they were posted. So, thank you. Lancer is a tabletop role-playing game co-written by Tom Bloom and Miguel Lopez, released in 2019. It primarily takes inspiration from 4th edition D&D and Blades in the Dark by John Harper. The game's primary focus is on strategy combat using large humanoid vehicles called Mechs. Best known for its combat system and customizability, I think Lancer's best quality is being an iconoclast in the RPG sphere. Lancer has a laser focus on its tactics and little else. While this garners some criticism, it definitely leads to the game having a solid identity. Lancer is about making your own cool mech to fight other cool mechs. Lancer is not about getting enough money to justify your existence in the universe. It's also not about how many widgets you can carry in your back pocket. It gives Lancer a personality you don't often see in other D20 fantasy games. Once you understand the game's core assumptions and focus on working with the game, Lancer becomes a lot more flexible in the aspects where it doesn't take itself too seriously. The narrative mechanics are so separated from the combat mechanics of the game, you could very easily change out the narrative system for something else. Lancer's unique influence is still felt 6 years later. Reading through Daggerheart made me think of it, and you can see some of its ideas throughout other games that have been released since, like Gubit Banwa. Talking about Lancer is a trip through a lot of conceits of modern game design. As we go through the system, I think it's important to think about the way this system seems to have inspired systems released after 2019. Lancer tends to get criticism from the larger tabletop role-playing game community by having relatively light rules in terms of narrative and design. While this is true, it's also intentional. The designers for Lancer were working to create a game where you punch robots with other cooler robots. To facilitate this, the combat is relatively in-depth and the narrative system is relatively simple. All normal checks in Lancer require you to roll a 10 or higher on a d20. This means, without modifiers, the player always has a 55% chance of success. This changes when a roll is difficult or risky. A difficult roll adds a d6 to your roll, and you subtract your total by the number rolled on the d6. A risky roll is one where you still need to roll a 10 to succeed, but you always suffer some consequences unless the total you rolled is above a 20. There are also heroic rolls, which require you to have a total roll of 20 or higher to simply succeed at them. Although this narrative resolution system is simplistic, even when we get to skills, it's done in service to the combat system, which is far more in-depth and interesting comparatively. That said, if the bare-bones nature of the default narrative resolution system is getting you down, the supplement Kirakan Trade Baronies has a different narrative resolution system to allow more player choice and build character connections. That said, I don't feel the game needs it. Perhaps this is just me agreeing with the design philosophy of the game, but if you're going to make a game about something, having the other systems in the game get out of the way as much as possible is largely a good thing. I've seen many D&D players focus on that game's similar narrative shortcomings, stating that it's largely a good thing that the game doesn't enforce any idea of what narrative should look like. I think there's a freedom in that, but again, I'm sure many people in the larger TTRPG space would disagree. Lancer, rather than using a bespoke skill list like Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons, uses a system called skill triggers. Skill triggers are specific phrases to describe something your character is good at. One of the examples given is apply fists to faces, which evokes the idea that your character is good at punching people. While the book provides a nice list of triggers, it also encourages players to come up with their own, describing what their character excels at. For these, it's fun to use common phrases like measures twice, cuts once. A skill trigger like that could help a player with a situation where they're building something carefully. Skill triggers are a simple system, which means it provides a lot of freedom to players, but that comes with a lot of reliance on the GM to rule favorably. Skill triggers and backgrounds are the only methods of adjusting your chances of success in narrative play. Due to their simple nature and lack of mechanical backbone, it's on the GM to give those skill triggers mechanical weight. The bespoke skill lists avoid this issue by providing a set of actions which can be performed by each skill. Lancer has no such system, meaning players need to appeal to the GM to properly use their skills. The issues with skill triggers are also their greatest asset. I'm sure many people feel as I've described, but I'm also certain many people think the system works fine for the types of games they run. It's ultimately up to the person running the game to decide if the system works for them, or if they would benefit from adapting or using another narrative system from a different game. For example, a much more in-depth narrative system is available in Crack and Trade Baronies. But I believe skill triggers, despite their issues, do as much as the system needs it to do for most tables. Lancer is a game about mech combat after all, so using a more complex narrative system could distract from that goal for both players and developers. Lancers are the titular pilots of Union-controlled space. They pilot mechs they either build themselves or took from someone else. Lancer doesn't give any prescriptions about your pilot other than they are a Lancer and are skilled at fighting other robots. As a result, pilot art from the Lancer fandom can be quite diverse and unique. When you build your pilot, the major mechanical aspects you'll worry about are picking your background, your skill triggers, your mech stats, your equipment, and your pilot talents. These 5 aspects are the only ones which affect gameplay. Your background may give you a boost on some narrative roles, your skill triggers affect your narrative capabilities, your mech stats affect what your mech is good at and how you pilot it, your equipment describes what your character is capable of outside of the robot, and your talents give you a specific flavor of powers when piloting your mech. While Lancer doesn't have the breadth of character options as something like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I believe the options here are almost always substantial. It also completely sidesteps any issue of biological determinism by only having humans in its setting, and having all of these aspects be given to every pilot. That being said, it's important to consider your options as a pilot, as you can always adjust your mech, but your pilot's talents and triggers will stay with you for as long as the pilot remains alive. Progression in Lancer uses a system called license levels. These license levels represent your notoriety and skill with piloting a mech in the setting. When you gain a license level, you select a mech frame and gain a license with that frame, getting access to their weapons, the frame itself, or some of its systems. You gain license levels by completing missions rather than any sort of hard XP requirement. Unlike other games, Lancer starts you out at license level 0. This means your character is stuck with only the most basic options in the game. While veteran players think the early license levels are restrictive, it's ultimately an important part of understanding the game as a brand new player. Although it also means you won't get the full frame of the mech you want until you're license level 2. You also gain core bonuses at every 3rd license level, which is a powerful improvement to your base mech. License levels in the narrative can look like practically anything. Maybe your group finds a bunch of tools and parts at a safe house that allows you to level up, your employer gives you access to frames as a promotion bonus, you get a strange email from yourself 10,000 years in the future saying that this is important, or maybe you send out an email to one of the 4 main mech manufacturers to have them send you the printing instructions for their tools. Given Lancer's unique framing, license levels are a smart solution to the issue of having so many options available to your mech at one time. Lancer's pilots have 4 skills which directly affect the power of their mechs: hull, agility, systems, and engineering. While it may be tempting to say that your mech is the one with these stats, they are tied to your pilot's abilities, and thus narratively are representations of your pilot's experience. Hull primarily affects your mech's health and hardiness. You want a lot of hull if you're expecting to take a lot of damage, or if you're expecting to ram into people a whole lot. Agility represents your pilot's ability to make fast and evasive mechs. If you want your mech to chase other mechs or hide, then you want a high agility. In combat, it primarily affects your mech's ability to avoid certain attacks. Systems represents how effective your pilot is at attacking using electronic warfare. If you want your mech to scan other mechs, hack into systems, or interact safely with other electronics, you want to have a high systems stat. In combat, this stat is often used to help with your tech actions. Engineering represents how well your mech can handle being pushed farther than expected. If you want your mech to handle the extreme cold, boost reactor output to larger devices, or keep it running well past its breaking point, you'll invest in engineering. You gain 2 points to put into your mech skills at license level 0, but as you level up, you'll continue to gain more and more until they reach their max at 6. These provide bonuses to your mech's combat stats, as well as any check your mech might make during narrative play. While I would like to give a full tutorial on Lancer's combat here, I unfortunately lack the time. As such, I'll give a brief rundown of some of Lancer's unique elements which separate it from other games of its type. First of all, no initiative roll. Lancer has the players start initiative in most instances, and then it alternates between players and the GM.
The players are given the freedom to strategize around their own turns, and even allow a player who ended a round to start the next one if needed. Secondly, Lancer has few modifiers to rolls. Difficulty and accuracy are modifiers which can increase your chance at failure or success, but rarely are you adding numbers to your roll to get a specific number. Most of the numbers you're comparing to are flat numbers on the sheet of the enemy you're trying to attack. Thirdly, Lancer lets you break the action economy of the game. By effectively overclocking your mech, you can get an extra quick action out of it you would otherwise not have. This has some penalties, but it does mean you're always making a choice about how much you're willing to risk to reach your goals. Those are the three main ideas I want to talk about with Lancer's combat. What makes Lancer and all of Tom's other games so interesting to me is their willingness to not worry about modifiers or increasing stats more and more as you play the game. Instead, Lancer wants you to get a large swath of options, which give you power by providing more answers to the various situations you may run into. It makes the game feel less like you're trying to find the best way to get your numbers up, and more like you're trying to pick up tools you know will help accomplish your goals better. As you level up in Lancer, you'll be working toward gaining a mech frame. While you do this in the early levels, it's important to make smart decisions about which frame you want to use and learn how to read a frame to understand what it's good at. We'll be using the Everest as an example in this video. When you're looking at a mech, the first thing you'll see are its size, armor, save target, and sensors. The size determines how large the mech will be when you play on a grid. The armor stat is used as flat damage reduction. The save target is the number your enemy needs to roll on a d20 in order to save against effects your mech creates. And your sensors describe a range for your mech's tech abilities. Next are the mech skill bases, and you'll see how they affect each of the mech systems. Then we have mech traits. For Everest, you can see they have a cool trait that allows them to use any quick action as a free action for any combat they're in, and they reduce the amount of repairs needed for structure damage. Next up are the mounts and the core system. Everest gives you a main mount, a flex mount, and a heavy mount. This is a good spread of options for what equipment you want to put on the Everest. There's also the core system, which boosts your mech up to be stronger for the rest of the scene it's in. Given the widespread of Everest's stats, you would be right in assuming that this mech is supposed to be pretty open to any playstyle. It's a good baseline, and as you gain more options from other mechs, it becomes even more versatile. As we continue the series, I'm going to cover the other mechs and discuss what they seem to be good at, and what they seem to struggle with, so having this understanding is important for those later videos.
Lancer's setting has 4 major mech manufacturers, with a 5th pseudo-manufacturer. While we don't have time for all the lore for these manufacturers, let's just say it's not hard to find reasons to dislike any one of them. That said, I think it's important to focus on the aggregate before we laser in on each license individually. As a quick rundown, IPS North Star are former pirates made into traders. Smith Shimano Corpro is a large business looking into progressing mankind as much as possible, no matter the consequences. Horus are a bunch of internet terrorists, and Harrison Armory are an old military group who believe in human supremacy over all other kinds of sentient creatures. The 5th manufacturer is General Massive Systems, and they are less talked about and only have one frame, the Everest. But similarly, they build all the basic weapons in the setting, so you could also say they're the reason conflict has escalated so much with mechs. While it's tempting to interpret the manufacturers in playstyles, I think a more interesting interpretation is some commentary on the players. IPSN makes mechs because they need to keep business going. Their mechs often, but not always, have civilian applications along with combat ones. SSC is testing themselves, pushing for greater and greater power, and think they can crack that code by integrating people with their mechs. Horus is a group that focuses on expressing themselves, even when it may seem goofy or strange to other people. Harrison Armory is conversely selling a narrative, as though their mechs are saying, "You're a hero when you pilot me, you're strong, dependable, and important." When looked at through this lens, suddenly people's preferences for certain manufacturers start to make sense. As an example, I find myself drawn to Smith Shimano, the corporation most focused on pushing humanity beyond its current limits, even if it means losing something along the way. What does your favorite mech manufacturer say about you?